Now for Richard Sapper, who has been called the best designer in the world.
Is it possible after?
Ladies and gentlemen, I don't see anything of you. I don't know why, but well, anyway, we see the light here. I think we just had a very, very clear demonstration of the possibilities of this system, which really puts us into a position where we can do things with light which we have never been able to do before. And I think that we probably do not know yet very well where this can all lead to, but it is certainly a very interesting technology. We have seen and heard a lot about this light, and I thought that maybe you would be interested in knowing why these different solutions that have been proposed for this metamorphosis lighting system look so different and look the way they look. I naturally cannot speak for my colleagues, but I have tried to think about why my solution looks the way it looks, which is a question that is not so easy to answer as you might think, because usually, at least myself, but I think most designers make those decisions not in a conscious way, but in an unconscious way, and if afterwards they shall explain why like this and not like that, they usually are in trouble. At least I usually am. Now, in this case, I have tried to find out why just this sort of strange shape of a pyramid standing on its head. And I will try shortly to explain this a little bit to you, because it might shed some light on the reasons why some designs and some products look the way they look. First of all, I must say that the form that this lamp now has is not its original form, because originally this was only a version of the lamp, and the main application of this principle was on a lamp standing on the floor. And but this version has then, at least up till now, has not been put into production, and we have only a lamp that's hanging from the ceiling. But it really makes only sense when you can have it in two versions, one from the ceiling and one from the floor. Anyway, when a designer, or myself, let me speak about myself personally, when I think of a new form, there can be two things can happen. Either I can invent something completely new that I have never done before in that way, or, and this happens more frequently, I think in families of designs. That means that when I work on a form, this form usually has had in my head, or also in my personal history, predecessors and forerunners, and exactly like a painter who develops a certain way of painting, of making paintings over several works, so also I usually develop a theme over several products and several of my projects. And sometimes these developments go over many, many years. And I thought that maybe it would be interesting for you to see what some of these evolving themes, which I will show with very, very few slides. One of the themes that has always interested me, and here I have to say that this is a particularly poignant case to show this, because the metamorphosis has been one of the themes that have most interested me in all my work. And whereas in this particular project, the metamorphosis takes place just in the light, but not in the form, I have been, in other works of myself, been very interested in the metamorphosis of the form. And I will show you some examples of that. I also have been interested in experimenting other families of forms which are related to this. And one is the concept of movement, which is related to the metamorphosis. And another is the concept of a clean geometric form, which is also related and makes for me sense only together with this concept of metamorphosis of the form. The concept of movement has been one of the things that has interested me from the very beginning of my activity. And I will show you here now, if I can find it, and if it comes, a slide of a watch, which is the oldest product that I have designed that is still in production. I designed this table clock when I was 27 years old, and it is in production since 1960. So you can buy still this clock in Italy, and you will say it's been in continuous production for 28 years. You will say, what is moving here? What is the concept of movement? It is very simple. This clock could not normally stand because it would be supposed to fall down. But it has counterweight in its back, and so that keeps it in its position as you see it on this picture. If you kick it over, it will start to dance on the table and roll around, and at the end it will stand up like one of those Chinese dolls that stand up. So this was the first time that I have experimented with a form in movement. And this then has evolved into something else. This is one of the earliest designs that I did with Marco Zanuso, and it is in Italy, a very well-known little transistor radio, which is the first case where we together tried this concept of metamorphosis, because if you don't use the radio, it looks like this. If you use it, it looks like this, because you can open it up. And this thing has really two faces that are in contrast to each other. And this sort of a metamorphosis has always intrigued me very much. We then tried something else. And this is a telephone. And also the telephone opens up and has this feature of a metamorphosis. Or here, this is a television set, which doesn't look like a television set. It looks like a cube. It is called black, and this is also a very well-known product. Only if you light it up, you see that it is a television set. This is the same thing seen from above. These are all designs of the 60s, very old. But in this black television set, the first time I have tried out to make a completely geometric form, because this thing is absolutely geometrically pure. And the metamorphosis here is only appearing in the image of the screen. This is another another form in movement, which you probably know. And this is another of the boxes that open and close. This was another radio which is very little known. And this is this is the first digital stopwatch that was ever built. And here I tried again this concept of a form that is different when it is not in use from when it is in use. This is when you open it. You have it in your hand. This is a, what do you call this? A dinette or something like that. Also, this folds and becomes flat. Here you have a scooter. And this is a folding easy chair. And you can hang it on the wall. And it has a little hook which can hide in the backrest. This is a secretaire which not only opens up, but it also can adjust its height so that you can work on it standing or sitting. And here you see again the concept of a form that can change. This is the first laptop of IBM. By the way, I have learned with surprise that I do not work for IBM anymore. Until this morning I did, and so this was news to me. By the way, I have never been a design director of IBM. I am since 1980 a design consultant to IBM. And this machine here, which for us today looks almost like antique, so old it is, but it's not so terribly old. It's about 10 years old. For a computer, this is almost unthinkable. This machine I did in this particular form because IBM has development labs all over the world, and at that time the development lab for mobile computers, for all personal computers, was in Boca Raton in Florida. And every time I came to Boca Raton, I found as a present on my table a little crocodile. Because the people of the design center there, they looked at the markets or in shops or so, if they could find a tin crocodile or a rubber crocodile or something like this, and they always gave me that crocodile because there are so many alligators in this area, and they found that this was funny. And when I was looking for a form to give to this laptop, I thought I should make it look a little bit like a crocodile, so that you can see here the teeth of the keyboard, and you can see how it opens its mouth. This is again the same machine. And this is a machine which is the successor to this convertible. And this is the ThinkPad, the IBM ThinkPad. And it goes back to my stopwatch that I showed you before. Here, I tried, again, this concept of metamorphosis, where I have a form that is as pure and clean as possible, and which does not show what is inside. This is just a box that could be a box of cigars. It doesn't really denounce its nature. Only when you open it, then you find out what it really is. This machine is now produced since 4 or 5 years, I think, and it can be considered one of the examples where design is also a good business. I am not usually a man who sustains that always good design is good business, because there are so many ugly things on the market that prove the contrary. But in this case, I think it is. Of this machine last year, IBM sold 1,200,000, and it generated $3.5 billion of revenue and $1 billion of profit for IBM. So it is certainly one of the most sold products that I've ever designed. This shows some of the changes that we made from one year to the next in this machine. The one to the right was the original, and all the components that have to be able to be loaded into this machine are loaded through the side walls. So the side walls are really looking like a succession of garage doors, and through each of these garage doors you can introduce one or the other component. And then in the next year we changed this completely. We just made the keyboard so that you can lift it, and now this thing is like a suitcase. You open the keyboard and then you drop all the components in. But the exterior form, was completely unchanged. This is now a product that is not yet in unlimited production. This is also a computer, but a computer that can be written on, and a computer that can read. And you can also here have it in different configurations and forms. You can have it sideways or topways. And this is a little bit of glance into the future, because we do not have yet the software that is working well enough to really use such a machine without a keyboard. So I just wanted to show you a little bit the background of a form that then becomes, for instance, a pyramid and becomes a lamp. But the formal idea behind it goes from one product to the next. There would be a lot to say about the way such projects can evolve in an industry and cannot evolve in another industry, because this is really the most difficult part of the work of a designer, is not to create a form, but to have this form then translated into a product. A product, in this case, being like a creature, because as long as it is a model, that's one thing, but to make an industrial product out of it is something completely different, and this has to be done in cooperation with the client, and there you need the right relation with the client, and this is where Italian industry is really one step ahead of many others, because Italian industry can understand what the right atmosphere is and what the right relations are to make such a thing possible. And certainly Artemide is a very good example of that, and I would like to discuss this maybe with my colleagues and Mr. Gismondi in a little circle here.
Okay, so the panelists will come up to the podium. While the panelists are settling on the podium, think about some questions that you might want to ask, and if you like, come up and I will give you the microphone and so that they can tape you. Before everybody settles down, I'd like to ask Mr. Gismondi a question. You. How many TCOs did you sell?
2.5 million, more than IBM.
I'd like to ask Mr. Sapper a question. How much money did you make on that TCO?
Not enough.
That's not good enough.
I don't know.
I have a question. Relative to your last question there, I'm just wondering, in product design, are you paid on a fixed fee to develop the concept of the product, or do you actually deal with a per piece profit on its sales?
Sapper.
If I would get a royalty on computers, I probably would not sit here, but in my yacht in the Caribbean.
So royalties are more profitable rather than getting an advance.
Well, that depends how you sell.
Okay, let's hear Mr. Gismondi's relationship. Please, pay attention. Your fee structure with your designers. What is your agreement with your designers? How do you work with them? Do they get an upfront fee, or do they get royalties? How do you work with your designers?
First of all, we are friends. Sailing boat with Sapper, we made many regatte. We went to ski with this friend, with the other friend. This is very important because the connection between designer and the company have to be friendly. We have to have the pleasure to say, your product is a garbage, please go. We pay royalties, only royalties, and everybody take a risk, the company and the designer. If he likes to design always Tizio, and also for our activity is a good deal.
How do you choose your designer, the designers that you work with? This group in particular, what was the reason you chose for the Metamorphosis? What was the reason you chose this particular group?
One choice is very, very important, is my wife. She is architect, and she is working with me, and he made one lamp. She, what I said? He. Excuse me.
But I can respond to this question too.
Bravo.
Okay.
Because I remember very well how I met Mr. Gismondi.
Why I am Mr. today? Ernesto.
Bravo.
Ernie,
Ernesto.
if you like.
Ernie.
I had told you before, I showed you this clock. That was my first product. That this static is the name of this clock that I showed. The first slide that I showed. At that time, when I was really a kid still, and had just more or less arrived in Italy, I was working in a department store, and this department store was very famous. It's La Rinascente, still exists, and at that time they had a project office that would develop products that then would be sold in the department store under their trademark. And they had kids from all over the world, very badly paid, to sit in this project office and design and design these products. And we had a lot of fun doing this. And a few rooms further down the corridor was the office of the Compasso d'Oro, which is the very famous Italian design award. And one day, the secretary of the Compasso d'Oro appeared in our studio, in our design studio, and she asked me if I would like to design a clock. And I said, why? And she said, well, there is a man who has just telephoned. He has a clock factory, and he's very furious because he sent his clocks to the Compasso d'Oro, but he didn't win any award. And so he asked me what he should do to win the Compasso d'Oro. And I said, well, first of all, you should get a good designer. And he said, well, could you tell me one? And she said, he must have had some interest in me, I think. She said, yes, I could tell you one. And then she ran to me and asked me if I would design the clock. So I ran back with her to her office. The man was still on the phone. And we made an appointment. And so I went to this guy, and he said to me, can you design for me a clock that wins the Compasso d'Oro? And I said, well, but I can't promise you, but I can try. And so I got the commission to design this clock, which won the Compasso d'Oro. So after that, naturally, I was a big hero with this guy. And I offered him the next design, which was another clock. And this idiot wouldn't produce it. He would say, well, this costs too much in tooling, and I don't know. Well, evidently he was just interested in winning the Compasso d'Oro, and then his interest in design had vanished. And so I had this clock in this model of this clock in my drawer. It was sitting there for a few years. And then one day, I don't now remember why, but one day I happened in your office. And you asked me, do you have something that I could produce? And I thought of this clock, and I thought, yes, maybe I have something. And so I brought this clock to you, and Ernesto made the clock. And its name is Tantalo, and it was produced for many years. Now it isn't produced anymore, but it was produced for many years. And this was a clock that originally I had made for somebody else. So this is how we got together.
May I tell my story?
Yes, please.
I met Ernesto in 1979 in Triennale of Milan. Triennale in Milano is an exhibition that happens every 3 years about design and about environmental solutions and so on. And in 1979, I designed very strange householders. And just the day after the opening, Ernesto called me and he told me, did you use that strange householders in Triennale? Well, forget it and come to design something for me. And I remember I went, I was very young and very emotional, and I went with a lamp. It was a square lamp. I brought this lamp and I said, this for me is a nice lamp, and I explained, and I tried to convince him how beautiful was this square lamps. After 3 months, this lamp was in production round. I mean, it's not a joke, it's true, and I have the drawing and I can show that it's a reality. But this expresses, if you want, my approach to design. That is not only to design, to express something that belongs to myself, but is to deal with the company and to try to understand which is the best best relation and the best combination of interest between a designer and a company. I believe that the design today as a discipline, as an institution, has very important roles in the society. And for the designer, it's not such important to design only the shape, but it's also to try to get in touch with the real problem of the industry, the real problem of technology, and to try to find solutions that sometimes can go over the shape and just the form of the object. So, for example, just as short, just to tell you, when I did
Memphis. Try
Memphis,
to
yeah?
explain Memphis.
No, I want to tell you about Ptolomeo that you know. This lamp I did for Artemide. I did Ptolomeo for Artemide, and the first prototypes was very, very desolating because was not standing at all. The lamp was always collapsing. And we had this prototype on the table, I think, for 6-7 months. And suddenly, one guy in the company came and he changed the small wheels that are turning the spring and instead to put aluminium wheels, he put nylon wheels, and with the nylon wheels the Ptolomeo was working. So you understand also how fragile is the capability of the designer when it is just such a small detail that can change the possibility to do a lamp and the possibility to do also such a success as Ptolomeo was.
Okay, now try to explain Memphis, please.
About Memphis?
Explain Memphis. Ernesto,
Memphis,
he will. Okay.
Memphis was a very interesting approach. You know, as Ettore Sotzas used to say at the time, Memphis is not a company where the design is at the service of the company, but is a company that is a service for the designer. So that changed completely the relations with the company. Memphis was not. I never got a brief from Memphis, and Memphis was a totally free way to design something, and to design something with the only problem to do something really belonging to the time in which it was done. And Memphis was something of the 80s, obviously. Memphis, in my opinion, was very important because express the idea that design is communication, and that through design, through very simple objects like tables, chairs, sofas, lamps, you can in some way design the spirit, the aim of your time, and that you can communicate a lot through the world, especially in a positive way as Memphis did.
What does Richard Sapper think of Memphis?
Well, about the same thing. Memphis was an absolutely fantastic experience and a fantastic adventure into a completely new world. The one thing that somehow Memphis never managed to do was to reconcile this fact of being a company at the service of the designer with the sales part of a company, which usually works just the other way around. So this I think that this in Memphis has never been brought to a real conclusion. This dialogue.
What do you say to people who say that Memphis was a wrong direction for design to take, that it was a mistake?
To me?
To any one of you.
Well,
That it didn't go anywhere, that it didn't take design the next step.
It did take design the next step.
Well, there's a school of opinion that says that it was a dead end.
Yeah, well, naturally there are schools of opinions about everything, but this is, I don't think, is not pertinent here. The problem of, if there is a problem with Memphis, it was not that. The problem of Memphis was was here. That was the problem of Memphis.
No. The difference is Artemide was the supporter of Memphis. It means Memphis is part of Artemide, or was part of Artemide, because we understand it's very important to be the first in the industrial design, but also it's important to think about the future, to explore, to go around, to find some different way. The final result was Memphis was a fantastic, incredible, successful, and change the image of the design, not the design, the image of the design. The problem is when the company is at the service of the designer, it's difficult to run the company, and Memphis is not successful anymore. In Artemide, the designers are not in the service of the company, but we work together, but it's at the service of the company. Because in Artemide, we are thinking about marketing, products, price, production, and Artemide is still in life.
But you see, the world of products is enormously varied. And naturally, you can pick out some products where the design part is so important that you can leave the others somewhere a little bit in the background. Fashion, for instance. But there are many other products where the exterior is just a part of it. And this is what you also said before. And in this case, I do not think that design is in any way less important than in others. But in order to transform a project or a model into a real product, you really need this sort of cooperation that Michele spoke about before. You need to have a real team to work together. And this is also, in many cases, the most exciting part of the work of a designer. But this is the more difficult and the more complicated, the bigger the company is that has to do this. And the more people are involved in making decisions and having to risk company money or stockholders' money, this is always getting much, much more difficult than if you are talking to a company which has one boss and he can decide everything. And this is a reason why, if you look at the best industrial design around, this is very often made by small companies, not by big companies.
How big is Artemide as a company?
We are, in dollar I don't know, I have to change, but is 150 billion around the world. This is the volume of Artemide. We have...
Lire.
What?
$100 million.
Not dollars.
Lire, not dollars, lire. I'm sorry. What is it in...
100 billion.
$100 million.
150,
$100
million. Okay.
No, it's quite interesting because this problem of the relationships between designers and industries are very close to the creativity research, because now the change of this kind of research is we cannot study only the individual, the mind of the individual. The creativity is not in the individual, but in a very wide context, because only the relationships between the individual creativity, the social and economical forces, we can call them the field, the real situation of the society and of the economy in a certain moment, and on the other side, the symbolic system of the discipline, the state of art, the domain. Only when there is an interaction, ordered interaction, connection between the individual, the single individual creativity, the economic goals, and the state of art of the discipline, in this case design, we can have new things, new products. the single individual is not enough to produce novelty. We must link our creativity with the external forces, the economical and the symbolic one. So this is the design is a clear example, in my opinion, of this necessity, the 3 points.
I have a question about this lighting system. In Holland, they just recently built a stadium for a soccer team, Ajax, and they, in the whole building, they worked for lightning because the hooliganism in Holland and European countries at soccer is pretty high. They want to calm down the audience with the lighting system. Do you think, because of the social and the psychological influence of this light, as you told us, do you think it would have an effect on the audience that big and that?
Good question.
You want to bet on it?
Well, I think the interesting idea of this product, you can have general rules, and then to give this general framework available to the creativity of the single designer. So I don't know if I can say yes, I agree or not agree to your question, but I think we can have some general aspect of the light and colors function which can be reached in an easier way to the unconscious, as Richard Sapper said at the beginning of his speech, of the designer. So this is, I think, is the most important goal of the psychological and sociological studies concerning light and colors. Not give us the studies concerning Gestalt or perception, try to give fixed rules, but give the general framework to help to develop new products and new conceptions.
Question about the metamorphosing. Is the goal to refine this system to the point where you are not as aware of the individual components, the colors that you demonstrated, and instead create something that's a much subtler fusion of all those elements, creating different temperatures of light that, let's say, is more normal than the extremes of color that you showed us?
Yeah, our target was to mix the color together, and the most important thing is the stratification. Did you see? It's really different. We don't like to have one color or a million color. It's possible to do, but it's more important to create atmosphere.
Yes, you, please.
I wanted to congratulate you. This, for me, is a big breakthrough. I worked with Richard Neutra, and he talked about the psychological factors, but not as well as the doctor, because he did that all intuitively. And he had a program in his mind called biorealism. And he felt there's a biological existence for human beings, kind. And this, and he tried to do this in hospitals where he worked more with carpet, and he talked about how carpet and the feeling of carpet,
Sure.
this work in mental institutions is very important because of what they do. So I want to commend you. But I think Charles Eames talked about it. And the next thing that could happen is some visuals could go with it, where you actually see the sun go up or down, in whatever way you want. And it's the closest thing I've seen that we could handle by hand and do it. So I really want to commend creativity and all that. And for you, Memphis was not a failure. Memphis was an inspiration and a point of departure and a point of talking. So I would never consider it a failure. And I don't know why you come from that point of view.
No, I didn't come from that point of view. I just merely voiced some of the opinions that exist in the world.
Excuse
yes,
me.
please.
I'd like to continue. This metamorphosis, it's only at the beginning. because we are working. We have many requests about the different application. You said hospital, or we have application in conference room, in banks, in hotels. A room in hotels, you change your life in the hotel. It's not so dangerous there. And we try to change the system and to utilize the system in different ways.
Is there a next step? What is the next step in the product's development? Will sizes be smaller?
One is to make small sizes. Depends of the application with this, if you need small. One other is to do bigger sizes, because sometimes you need more light, more watts than this. And the other is to find the application in the window, for example. You don't see here, but you saw in the exhibition, when the color are working, you see different effects. It's very good for the window, for the fashion, shopping center.
Okay, we are running out of time. There's one last question there.
When you showed your 1960 television cube, it didn't look like a TV because the picture was off, and you said it shows as a TV when it's on. However, when you said it was a perfectly contained cube, your photographs belied your statement because there was a very ugly antenna sticking out. Did you, in your design, ever attempt to hide the television within that so-called self-contained cube?
No, the antenna was a part of it. We were not so radical that we would say, now we hide the antenna.
It can be done, can it not?
Well, it could have been done, certainly. You don't need an antenna in a TV set. If you have an exterior antenna, you don't need that. So, as a matter of fact, all these antennas are detachable. So if you, for instance, would not have liked this antenna sticking out, you just took it off. No problem. Well, there was no reason to, because you just stick a cable into the TV set and you have your antenna.
Okay, one last question, and we're being told to please.
I am not a physician, but when I was a student, they said the fundamental color are blue, green, and red.
This is supported also by the physiology of seeing. The cells, the retinal cells, are sensible to colors, have pigments sensible to these wavelengths, red, blue, and green. So there is this is an old theory of trichromatism, starting the 18th and 19th century. Our cells contains pigments sensible to these three fundamental colors.
Okay, if you haven't seen the exhibition yet, please do and play with the lamps. Thank you for coming, and there is a reception afterwards where you can meet the designers.